First we begin, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Also, let us know where and when you're watching this. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. I was 22, the age when everything's supposed to start, and nothing really does. Fresh degree, empty wallet, a calendar full of odd jobs that smelled like bleach and baby snack crackers. When Craig called, his voice sounded like a handshake, warm, practiced, a touch too eager. He needed someone to stay at his place for a week and keep his golden retriever company overnight. Anxious dog, extra pay, house on the edge of town where the map fades into trees. I told myself it was perfect. I told myself a lot of things back then. His place looked like a paused decade. Beige carpets that drank sound. Floral curtains suspended in a permanent afternoon. The guest room was off the living room, first floor. Clean sheets that felt starched with strangers' rules. He pointed things out with a teacher's rhythm. Food in this fridge, not that one. Lights here, not there. Spare key under a ceramic frog near the back steps. He smiled and apologized for the decor, like he was embarrassed by a bad haircut the house couldn't grow out of. I laughed. He liked that. The first 2 nights were quiet in the way only old houses can be. Everything creaks, yet somehow nothing interrupts. Max, beautiful, gold, nervous, slept at my feet and let out those little dog sighs that make rooms feel safe. I watched TV too loud, ate someone else's grapes, brushed my teeth with the door half open because the silence felt too big to be left alone. Night 3. The room wasn't different. I was. The lamp cast a warm circle on the dresser, where a glossy black alarm clock sat, the kind that screams blue digits into the dark. It didn't match the rest. Too new, too sleek, too intentional. I don't know what made me really look. Maybe it was the way the light kissed a single tiny dot above the numbers, perfectly round, perfectly centered. Not a scuff, not a sensor, a pinhole, pointed directly at the bed. My breath snagged. Heat poured into my face, then vanished, like a wave pulling back and leaving me cold and sticky. I picked it up, heavier than it had any right to be, and under the plastic, a faint whir, like a small fan, like breath where breath shouldn't be. I tilted it toward me, and the little eyes stared right through me. Max lifted his head and let out a soft whine, ears pushed back as if he was trying to make himself smaller. Then, a sound from farther in the house. Not the front door, not the kitchen. Deeper. The quiet click of a door easing shut, the way people close things when they believe they're the only ones listening. The carpet in the hallway caught a footstep, then another. Slow, careful. Counting the distance between us. A cold, mean energy ran down my arms. I put the clock back exactly where it had been, like putting a mask back on a face. The doorknob looked too shiny. I moved fast and turned the lock just as those footsteps stopped on the other side. There was a beat of absolute nothing. Then his voice. "Hey, it's me. I left something in there last time. Mind opening up?" Calm, slightly breathless. Polite's corpse dressed for church. I couldn't make my mouth work. He tried again, softer, choosing words like sugar cubes. He said that clock thing was a motion sensor for the dog. He didn't mention it because he didn't want to freak me out. He told me to come out, we could talk like adults. When I didn't answer, the gentle knocking lost its patience. The thuds shook dust loose from the picture frames. Max started barking and throwing his weight at the door, nails scratching the wood in frantic little bursts. I glanced at the window. It was low, one of those old single-pane sliders with a latch that sticks on humid nights. My fingers slipped twice. On the third try it popped, and the night shoved cool air into my face. Behind me, Craig's tone snapped. No more soft edges, just the hard parts. He said he had a key. He said he'd call the cops. He said he'd tell them I broke in. He said words that sounded like paperwork and consequences and choices I didn't want to live inside. I didn't wait for the key. I shoved the window up, slung a leg over, dropped onto damp grass. Knees, palms, the bright sting of gravel. The kind of little pain that reminds you you're real. Max scrambled at the sill, claws ticking panic, but he didn't jump. I ran the length of the side yard, and the gravel driveway stole my balance twice. At the road, black and empty, I ducked behind a row of mailboxes, cold metal against my spine, and called my mother. 15 minutes can last a lifetime. Headlights finally appeared and peeled me from the night. By morning, outrage had cooled into something lonelier and worse. I blocked his number. I called a lawyer. I told the whole story, every detail vibrating out of me like a fever. The answer was a careful shrug wrapped in legal cloth. Without the device in my hand, without photos, recordings, anything tangible, there wasn't much to hold on to besides disgust. He could say censor. He could say safety for the dog. He could say anything at all, and I would have a feeling. I thought about going back. I thought about walking in, grabbing that glossy little clock, prying it open and making it tell the truth. But the thought of stepping inside that house again, of smelling that lemon cleaner, of hearing the carpet accept my footsteps, it made my skin crawl from the inside out, so I didn't. And he didn't pay me for the nights I'd already spent inside his story. After that, the world was suddenly full of eyes. Every smoke detector was a pupil. Every picture frame a spy. Every blinking LED an accusation. I started checking the backs of mirrors, the undersides of shelves, the hollow places in my own apartment that I'd never thought of as hollow. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams were blue numbers and a tiny black mouth that never stopped watching. I stopped trusting silence. Here's the part I rarely say out loud. On that third night, when I heard the door close somewhere deep in that house I believed was empty, I felt something old and certain lean over my shoulder and whisper the truth. He hadn't come back early. He'd never left. Maybe he had a quiet corner in the basement where the air went stale and wires hummed. Maybe there was a thin path through the patterned wallpaper where a camera cable had been threaded carefully behind the seams. Maybe he'd been listening to my footsteps through the carpet, timing his, playing the house like an instrument he'd practiced for years. I don't know. I don't have proof. I have the sound of a door clicking shut behind a breath I didn't recognize and the weight of an alarm clock that could whisper, even when it wasn't supposed to. I still see the room sometimes. The lamp glow, the tidy bed, the dresser that pretended to be harmless. And I see my reflection bent inside that tiny lens, small and distorted and trapped. That's what scares me, even now. Not that there was a camera. Not even that there was a man on the other side of the door. It's the way a house can fold around a stranger's intentions and make space for them. The way silence can be a person. The way your own heartbeat can drown out the one sound that would have saved you. He and I weren't friends. We were rent in silence. A Facebook message. A quick tour. A handshake that didn't linger. He worked late at a warehouse. I worked early. Our lives slid past each other like trains in fog. For 2 months, the arrangement was perfect. Closed doors, clean dishes, the occasional nod that meant I exist and nothing more. Then tiny things in my room started moving without me. A closet door I always kept shut stood ajar like it had something to confess. My chair angled toward the bed as if it had spent the day watching me sleep. Small wrongs, easy to ignore. Until they stack. Saturday morning light made dust look like snow. I was wiping down the window frame when I saw it. A single black dot in the corner, where the wall meets the ceiling. The kind of dot that pretends to be a flaw. Up close, it wasn't paint. It was a lens. A tiny wireless eye aimed straight at my bed. My hand went cold around the cloth. The camera had a slot for a memory card. The slot was empty. like a mouth that had already swallowed. 2 keys existed for my door. One of them was in my pocket. The math didn't need help. His door was closed. His room smelled like time that forgot to move. Old food and laundry heat gone sour. Blinds shut at noon. A desk drowned in loose change and unopened mail. I wanted a confession and found clutter. No more cameras. No laptop left open like a trap. Just the echo of the lens I'd pulled from my wall, and the awareness that someone had decided my room was a place they owned. I put the camera in my nightstand under a stack of socks, pressed it flat with my palm. If he came for it, I'd see him. If he didn't, I'd learn how to sleep next to a question mark. 2 nights passed like held breath. On the 3rd, at 3 a.m., the drawer whispered. The soft slide of wood against wood, a shadow bent over my nightstand. I left my eyes almost closed and listened to the room forget how to breathe. He was there, in my space, hands moving through my things as if they'd always belonged to him. The air changed when he froze. It tightened. He turned his head toward the bed and let the silence tell him I was awake. "I know you're awake," he said, and the whisper carried like a blade. "What did you do with it?" Fear burns hot, then it hardens. I sat up. The words came out of me before caution could catch them. Why was there a camera in my room? Why aim it at my bed? He said he thought I was stealing from him. He said the camera was proof. The lie landed heavy because it didn't even bother to dress itself. Proof lives in wallets and drawers, not in the place a person is most human. He kept saying I was overreacting while standing in the room he entered without permission at 3 in the morning. We were both whispering and both loud. I yanked the drawer open, grabbed the camera, felt its cheap plastic flex in my hand. I held it up like a verdict and walked out, my feet hitting the hall too hard. In the kitchen, I dropped it into the trash. The sound was hollow. Nothing about it broke the way I needed it to. He stood in the doorway, fists pressed tight, eyes empty of anything you'd want to see. Then he turned and left me with the buzzing light of the fridge and a feeling that the apartment had tilted. No sleep. The TV muttered to keep the dark company. Dawn came slow, embarrassed. The trash can was neat when I lifted the lid. The camera was gone. The landlord promised to look into it, which is a phrase that doesn't point anywhere. Privacy sounds like a soft word until it's taken. Bedrooms and bathrooms are borders even when the lease is shared. Cameras there aren't gray. They're violations, with or without audio, whether or not the person who put them there knows the law by heart. But without the device in my hand and a picture with time-stamped proof, everything becomes fog, and fog is where people go to disappear from responsibility. Nights changed shape after that. Footsteps came down the hall and stopped outside my door. Not knocking, not moving. The wood under the carpet made small complaint sounds, the slow crack language of weight shifting from one foot to the other. He stood there for minutes, like a smudge that wouldn't wipe away. Every outlet looked like an eye. Every screw in the wall was a pupil. I found nothing else, and that felt worse than finding everything. Not knowing makes the dark big. People like to say, just move, as if the body that flinches at 3 a.m. isn't already packing itself. I'm making plans. I'm taking pictures of everything that points where cameras shouldn't point. I'm talking and writing so the paper trail is louder than any whisper in a hallway. Laws talk about reasonable expectation of privacy, and bedrooms are the definition of that phrase, whether it's a rental, a dorm, a shared house, or a place with both names on the lease. No contract in the country makes it okay to watch someone sleep. Not here, not anywhere. Until the last box is gone, I sleep with the light on and the nightstand empty. The room looks back at me in the quiet. Sometimes I think I hear the drawer move on its own, a phantom muscle memory in the wood. Sometimes the floor outside my door complains like it did that night. And sometimes It's truly quiet. That's when I feel the most watched. Because once you've been seen without your permission, silence doesn't sound empty anymore. It sounds like someone holding their breath. We rolled up just before sunset, coffee breath and road dust still on our tongues, to a house that looked like a postcard someone had left out in the rain. 2 stories, wraparound porch, warm yellow bulbs that tried too hard to look friendly. The listing had been glowing. The rule was simple: basement storage, off limits. Owners do that all the time. Lock a door, lock away their lives. It barely registered, until the place stood alone at the edge of the trees, and the quiet felt like something waiting with its mouth closed. He was already on the porch when the engine died. Tall, a little folded in the shoulders, hair combed to disguise the retreat. Pressed flannel tucked into jeans like a uniform for a job he invented. The smile sat on his face like a sticker, applied, not grown. Inside, the house smelled like dust glazed with sweetness, like candle wax after a party no one came to. The living room faced an old TV. The kitchen was clean the way history is clean, wiped but never new. Upstairs, 1 bedroom, big bed, ceiling fan, little dresser with a mirror that reflected the light and somehow dimmed the room anyway. Back downstairs, he tapped the basement door. A thick padlock hung there, heavy as a sentence. "This stays locked," he said. "No warmth, just the shape of a rule." Then he wished us a pleasant stay and left the quiet to do the rest. Night pulled the road away. Crickets stitched the edges of the dark. We lay under the fan and listened to a silence so complete it felt intentional. Sometime after midnight, something in the floor below us thudded once, like a hand setting down a weight on concrete. We waited for a second noise to prove the first one real. None came. Morning made it easy to lie to ourselves. Breakfast in town, laughter, shops with bells that knew our names by the second ring. We came back after dark and made dinner that made the house smell like home for about an hour. At 2 a.m., the house exhaled a sound from its throat, a dragging, slow and sandpapery, like something heavy being pulled across a rough floor. 5 seconds of friction. A stillness that learned us. Then it started again. The first explanation we tried on was the only polite one. Maybe the host had returned for something, but he'd promised not to. Promises are just locks without metal. We stayed awake long enough to name each small noise. Then we slept with our eyes open. The second night was worse because it decided to be specific. Footsteps in the basement. 4 or 5. Pause. 3 more. Each break long enough for whoever, whatever, to listen to the ceiling, listen back. Emma whispered that she heard breathing between the steps. She's not the kind of person who says things like that. The ceiling above us turned into a skin we didn't want to break. We held still like prey that believes in stillness. By the third morning, the rooms had absorbed our fear and started giving it back. We stepped softer. We laughed too loud to prove there was nothing to be quiet about. At noon, I leaned into the locked basement door and breathed in. Stale, damp air with a sour thread, like fruit forgotten under a cabinet. The padlock stared straight ahead. The rule felt taller than it had on day 1. Midnight came earlier that night. The first sound was delicate, a tiny metal clink, precise and regular, like a chain settling or a hook kissing something it was not supposed to touch. Then the steps again, wearing the floor in nervous paths. On the 4th evening, fear changed shape. Emma stood beneath the smoke detector over the bed and asked, "Does that look wrong to you?" It did. There was a single glossy dot at the center that caught the light in a way plastic doesn't. I climbed on the bed, twisted the cap, and felt the little unit loosen with a soft, guilty crack. Inside was a battery-powered eye with a green pulse, patient, and pointed at where we slept.
I turned and saw a second, smaller lens peeking from a pinhole near the mirror's edge.
Both were married to the bed, like a ceremony no one consented to. We stopped being guests and became evacuees. Clothes were stuffed, not folded. Zippers stuttered. Shoes were half on when the front door let us go. Under the fluorescent truth of a gas station, we called the police and sounded like people explaining a nightmare to someone who wasn't there. Officers met us at the house. We were technically still paid up, still allowed in, which felt like a technicality wearing human skin. They bagged the little eyes and presumably their memories. They wrote down every tremble we turned into words. The basement door, that had been locked with a padlock big enough to anchor a boat, stood open like a mouth in a scream. The darkness inside wasn't simple. It was thick, layered, as if the black had weight. We said, "It was locked." They nodded the way people nod at weather. The officers went down first. Their radios hissed. Wood stairs reported each step like a tattletale. We waited with our hands at useless angles. Then voices, raised. A clatter. A short, ugly commotion swallowed by concrete and stored air. They called us down. The smell met us halfway. Cold concrete, warm dust. A faint sweetness rotting at the edges. In the corner, a closet door stood ajar. Inside, a folding chair, a small monitor. Wires braided neat as nerves. A place to sit and watch a house breathe through other people's nights. And there, pale, too small for the pressed flannel he'd worn like a trustworthy uniform, was the host. He hadn't dropped by. He hadn't returned for something forgotten. He had never left. He'd been living beneath our footsteps, measuring our silence, listening for our sleep. They cuffed him. Words like criminal trespass and invasion of privacy turned solid in the air, the way names on a charging document do. Bedrooms and bathrooms are not gray areas. They are borders. Cameras in those spaces are not policy debates. They are violations. The officers took the evidence. They took our statements. They took the house back from him, at least for the moment. We drove away with the sensation that part of us was still in that basement closet, flickering on a small screen. Later, a platform offered a voucher like a bandage for a bruise on the inside of the body. It covered nothing that hurt. And even now, every rental door has a weight when it closes. Every smoke detector earns a second look. The off-limits door is always the one that keeps breathing at night. If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Some rules are warnings, and some warnings are confessions. When the house tells the truth in its own slow language, footsteps, metal kisses, the hiss of a lens, believe it before it speaks again.